how to proceed from there. Because you see, a few weeks ago, I had a plan. That is to say that I had at least a vague general idea of how I was going to go about making this make sense, where I was going to turn to for inspiration, and which teachers and authors I'd look to for wisdom. And Alan Watts wasn't on that little mental list of mine, but I'm sure we can all agree that he definitely should have been, right? The truth is, I almost never have any concrete plans, in general. And if I've asked you to remind me of something so I don't lose track of it, now you understand why I asked that. I try my best to avoid the temptation to control things. We all know that God is the only one in control of anything, ever. We just let our egos make us believe that we know better than God. And God never ceases to remind us that that ain't so, right? But nonetheless, I had a stack of books and several notebooks worth of notes and thoughts sitting on my kitchen bookcase. And I should remind you that my kitchen bookcase looks almost exactly like my dining room table. Because although we have 8 people living in our house, there are only 4 human people with butts designed for chairs, and our table seats 6. So the other 2 spots, give or take a foot or 3, are taken up by my books and stuff. And that stack of books on my table bookcase, it went almost entirely untouched last week. And so it's my hope that we'll be able to marry the concepts of Alan Watts, Leonard Jacobson, Osho, and a handful of others. Will that happen? Who knows? Certainly not I. The thing I've noticed is that we have all these teachers available to us. Teachers who have been trying to impress dang near identical concepts upon humanity for millennia. And although the concepts are echoes of each other from one teacher to the next, the ways that they relate those concepts can vary to such a degree that one could reasonably devote their entire life to studying and still not be able to succinctly sum up what it all means. So as I pull at the threads of the many teachings which inspire me, please be patient as I try to weave them together. I've never used this loom. So in Life Beyond the Ego, Leonard Jacobson says that ego is the custodian of separation. That if you are caught in the world of the mind, which is a world of separation and illusion, then the ego is in control. And remember from our talks in the Now series, whenever you're in your mind, thinking and planning and not totally paying attention to what's really happening around you, you are not here. You are not fully present now. And so you are not fully experiencing the beautiful adventure of this life. Not really. And in the material that we looked at last week, Alan Watts said that the ego is the mask that we wear. It's all the great many ways we painstakingly work to show the world who we are and what we're doing, even though we're not actually really doing any of those things, not in any real way. In fact, at the heart of what he's saying there, when we're working to appear as though we are something, right? When we're trying to do something to convey what we think we're supposed to, we're actually doing the opposite. We are so focused on looking like the embodiment of what we want to convey to the people around us that we're about as far away from actually embodying any of it as we could possibly be. Like the example of students trying to look like they're listening after a teacher scolds them to pay attention, right? They all stare pointedly at the teacher, and various stern facial expressions and bodily positions to convey, we're paying attention, right, Carlos? Have you seen this? Yeah? And Eddie, right? Okay. The teacher feels real good about this, right? They are totally paying attention to me. The teacher is comforted. But in reality, they're not absorbing any of it. They're too focused on doing all of the physical things to make it look like they're learning. So focused on that they couldn't even begin to learn, no matter how hard they continued to try. And I made this observation in my middle son. If he was looking at you, he had no idea what you were talking about. Not a clue. If he was looking away, not even facing you, he could be completely facing this way, doing something. He could remember every word anybody said in the room. So I learned that by watching him. And if any of that was confusing, go to our Facebook and listen to the talks from the last 2 weeks. That'll probably clear things up a bit. But considering my struggle in trying to make sense of it all, when I'm up here talking to you, it is entirely possible that you'll become confused in a different way. And if that's the case, let's talk about it. Maybe together we can make things clearer for both of us. Now, I'm going to pick up at what will, at first blush, appear to be a very random place in a lecture given by Alan Watts many decades ago. Stick with me here because it's important. He said, watch out for your social conditioning and how your constant commerce in language with other people shapes the way in which you actually sense the world. Now, we say seeing is believing, but it is truer to say that believing is seeing. There was a very marvelous scientist of optics by the name of Adelbert Ames, who devised a whole series of experiments where you could go into a big room, say with booths all around, and in these booths there were exhibits that defied the laws of logic, or seemed to. There was, for example, the marvelous experiment of the trapezoidal window. You make a window frame, one side of which is much longer than the other, see? Then you suspend this on wires in such a way that an axis is formed through the perpendicular center of the frame. And on this, the frame revolves. What you see is a window frame twitching, like this. It's actually going around, but it seems to be twitching. Then you put a little cube on one upper corner and color it red so it'll stand out. And then you see this thing twitching, but the cube unaccountably going around. Then he also had another experiment where you go into a dark room and there's a group of people and a little bright light suddenly appears in front of them, very small. And the operator says, will those who observe any movement of this light please describe it? So somebody says it's floating upwards. And somebody else says it's drifting off to the left. And all this conversation goes on. Then the lights are turned up and it is shown, it is shown that this point had never moved at all. My eyes moved from the page, but that point of light did not move. I had to find it. I was looking for it moving left, right? So there were all kinds of things like that. That little light was right there. People believed it to be that way. Ames only scratched the surface of what we see because we believe in it. We see what we want to see or what we're supposed to see, and we're not really aware of what's going on. Now, all stage magic is based on this, and this is why one can learn a great deal about mysticism from stage magic. What the magician does is he persuades you to see what you expect to see. But in the meantime, he does something completely unexpected. He says, your attention has been misdirected. And he says, look at this, okay? I want you to look at it very carefully because we don't want any hocus pocus around here. See? No hocus pocus. I want you to examine this thing to make sure there's no hocus pocus. Meanwhile, he's doing something that you don't notice at all and laying a trap. He's laying a trap. So that when you understand the nature of stage magic, you think, wow, how simple that was. Why was I such a fool that I overlooked this simple trick? There's a thing in here that if you turn it that way, it goes bendy. But if you turn it this way, it don't go bendy. That's all it is. That's all it is. So you say to yourself when you understand, why didn't I see that? And the best tricks are the simplest, and they don't involve complicated apparatus at all. The best stage magicians are the ones who will stand in the middle of a crowd of people you know, with no stage hocus pocus or wires or trap doors, anything like that. And right under your nose will use a deck of cards or a few coins or a piece of rope to do things that flabbergast people totally. And all those things are extremely simple once you know. And so that's very much like being enlightened, having Satori. When you get it, you think, oh, for heaven's sake, why didn't I see that? I mean, how obvious. But the difficulty in communication here is that Satori, or enlightenment, is very much like getting the point of a joke. And then you laugh. You laugh genuinely from here. But if somebody explains it to you, you don't get the same laugh as if you saw it right off. You get a throat laugh instead of a belly laugh. So that's why people are reluctant to explain too much about it. Rather, use the method whereby you will see it for yourself. And then laugh, or whatever is the cosmic equivalent. So therefore, we are, most of us, in a state of hypnosis induced by the incantation of language, the enchantment, the spell binding. And when one speaks of awakening, as say in Buddhism, one speaks of the Buddha as the awakened one. It means, therefore, dehypnotization, coming to your senses. But of course, to do that, you have to go out of your mind. Well then, what that involves, among other things, is an awakening to the true structure of your common sense. Okay, before we go any further, I want to clear something up linguistically. Okay, every one of the teachers I know of, and I mean darn near every darn one, they all have a different name for the state of living from that blind, unaware state of senses and ego. Okay, Alan Watts calls it being hypnotized. Leonard Jacobson calls it being in the dream. A Course in Miracles says this is all an illusion. Ernest Holmes called it race consciousness, or being human, as in the human gives way to the divine. Osho would refer to it in any of the 4 stages of ashramas, which describe the states of spiritual development in the Hindu faith, which is Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. And Osho's teachings get extra tricky because he uses and combines Buddhism and Hinduism interchangeably. So that can be fascinating. And Jesus called it being of this world. Here's the bottom line. It is all the same thing. All the teachers have a different name for it, but it's all the same thing. So keep that in mind as I flip from teacher to teacher throughout this whole series of talks. As for me, I'm going to go with being in the mind or living from ego as opposed to being in the present or being here in the now, in the moment. Fully engaged, right? Now I'm going to turn to Leonard Jacobson in his book, Life Beyond the Ego, on page 26. And I think you're going to find that Alan Watts and Leonard Jacobson are almost having a conversation with each other. Once you hear this, you're going to see that they're perfectly teaching us together. And I found that extremely cool because I discovered that without trying. So he says, one of the three most important things to be aware of on this path of awakening is the distinction between who you are when you are fully present and who you have become living within the dream for so many years. When you are present, you are an awakened being of love, acceptance, and compassion. You are silent, peaceful, and calm. And I'm just going to interject, I can never see silent as an option. That will undoubtedly not be my experience, but I'm going to let you have that, Leonard. That's all yours. But I'll go back. He says you are without fear or judgment. You are empowered from within. You feel whole and complete. At deeper levels of presence, you exist in the realization of oneness, and you sense the living presence of God in all things present. But who have you become on this long journey lost within the dream? Most of us are committed to hiding and denying who we've become. We don't want anyone to know who we've become for fear of rejection, judgment, hurt, or abandonment. However, there is a law. I call it one of God's laws. If you deny, hide, judge, or try to fix what you have become, you will be denied the truth of who you are. If you judge any aspect of yourself within the dream, you will remain in the dream. On the other hand, if you are willing to go through a process of owning, acknowledging, confessing, and revealing who you have become, then the doorway to presence will be open for you. From presence, you bring love, acceptance, and compassion toward who you have become in the dream, which releases you into the truth of who you are. The words of Jesus can guide us in this regard. He said, all that is hidden shall be revealed. In the context of awakening, he is saying that whatever is hidden in the dark recesses of our minds must be brought to conscious awareness for healing, completion, and release. As we heal and release the past, we are open more fully into the present moment. And I want to clarify something here, because I know that there are many people who heard confessing and went, oh, nuh-uh, right? Because confession meant something totally different growing up. And to you, I want to say that you confess to yourself. You do not have to go to any great person who deems themselves worthy of forgiving you. You must be real with you and forgive you. No one else needs to be involved in that. Now, going back to where we're going, I know that didn't make sense, but it made sense to me. For both of them, Alan Watts and Leonard Jacobson, it's a matter of figuring out how things really are. And also for both of them, how things really are is simple and beautiful. And I have found for myself that what they're both saying is absolutely true. When I come up here to talk with you, I am diligent in not just sharing what the masters have taught, not just reading to you from books and pieces of lecture, but sharing my own experience and sharing the tools which have worked for me. In July of 2011, and I know this because I still have my journals from back then, my dear friend Marilyn McKeever, hold on a second. Hey Marilyn, what's up lady? I haven't seen you in a while. I know that you're listening right now, and I want to say thank you still for changing my life. I love you. Okay, coming back. Anyway, she gave me this exercise, borrowed from a 12-step book, which all by itself has absolutely transformed my life. This one simple thing. And that transformation happened very, very quickly. That it was so much faster than one would imagine in their wildest dreams. I mean, the person I was when I began this practice was very different from the person I was 30 days later. And 6 months later, the change was downright profound. And today, I am fathoms away from any of that. This singular exercise helped me come into the me that I experience today. And yes, I know that was an oddly structured sentence, but I think that if you think about that, it'll make sense, because it's exactly what I meant. Now, I've brought this, I know my poor dad's up there going, what? I've brought this exercise to you guys several times through the last few years. And I believe this is actually my 4th time handing it out. And I'm going to keep on handing it out until I find something that's as powerful as this. Because thus far, I haven't found anything which comes even remotely close. In your programs is a sheet that says a daily exercise for total transformation. Now, the one that Marilyn handed me said to complete the questions every night before bed, right? And I'm going to stop for a second. For you folks online, I'm going to come back later and post that whole list for you, because I didn't think to put it in the body of this. So I will come back and make sure that you've got that, assuming someone reminds me, because I don't have a plan. So anyhow, you were supposed to answer the questions every night before bed. But I found for me, it always helped to do it in the morning, right after I wake up. I answer the questions about the day before, because I think that doing it this way helped me in the beginning to have a clear idea of how to stop tripping myself up each day. You may prefer to do it the original way, it's entirely up to you, but framing it in the first thing in the morning when I'm about to go out in the world and do the world things, looking back and seeing, ooh, I have to write about that from yesterday, helps you to not make the same choices, right? Helps you to respond a little bit differently during the day. And if you really want to experience the dramatic results I did, there are 2 equally important things you must do. First, never ever write down a simple yes or no answer to any question. Do you remember when we were in school and the teacher would make us answer every question with at least 3 sentences? Even if it didn't seem to warrant 3 sentences? Okay, that's a good rule of thumb to follow here. Now, let me stop. Okay, you do not need to hold yourself to 3 sentences. A minimum of 3, because you may need a page. You may find yourself going, ooh, yeah, I have clarity now. And writing down a whole experience, and that can take many sentences. I've been there. But stick to 3. It's important. For example, for a question with a no answer, you could expand by explaining another situation where you chose differently in the past, which resulted in a yes, and then expand to say, now I, and so, no. Right? Now whatever I did differently. And so no. So by doing that, it sounds like it doesn't matter, but by doing that, by breaking it apart like that, I can say no, because you're teaching yourself how to permanently reshape your habits. You're saying, I did this myself, and this is how. You are literally your own student and teacher. Now, the second thing, and I cannot stress this enough, this is not about judgment. You are not saying, I owe an apology. How could I have done that? I'm an awful person. Oh no. No. This is an observation. One that allows you to become honest and authentic with how you move throughout your life. Right? Where was I judgmental? I totally looked at that person and I thought, whatever it is, I assumed, and next time I won't. That's all it is. It's not, I messed up and I must pay. It's, well, I see what I did, and I'm not going to do it that way. Right? It is through frogs. It is through absolute honesty and through the diligent, wow, the whole swamp is here. Through the diligent practice of choosing differently that you learn to become present and stay here. It is only when we approach life with eyes wide open, open to who we are and who we've believed ourselves to be, that we begin to eliminate limiting thoughts and actions from our everyday life. If you find that you are judging yourself harshly and shoulding all over yourself, stop for a moment. Take a deep breath and know that it is your ego making you feel that way. Then, okay, well, remember how I said that some of the teachers of this kind of stuff say that we're sleeping or in a dream when we're living from ego, right? Okay, and that we're seeking to awaken, right? So ego, sleep, awaken. Got it? Okay, so when you encounter this particular judging problem, pretend that you, the person writing the answers to the questions, are the awake part, and your ego is the brat living in this dream state, right? And when that ego brat is making you feel awful and guilty and worthless and all those other things that it does, you tell it to shut up. You literally tell it to go and zip its figurative lips. And I do mean that literally. Say, ego, shut up, right? And if you're like me, you can call your ego self by your own name without feeling a whit of ick about it. Shut up, Gina. You know that you weren't trying to be less than kind and loving. You know that you didn't mean to hurt anyone or upset anyone. If you didn't mean for it to happen, it was a mistake. And I don't get upset by mistakes because mistakes are how we learn. And that's why we're here. So if you're going to try and make me feel bad about giving myself a chance to learn something new, you can go somewhere else and take a good long time out. And I don't want to hear from you again until you're going to be nice to me. Yes, I've had this conversation with myself. If it seems very realistic in my acting, that's why. But say something to that effect each and every time that ego voice tries to pipe up and make you feel bad about you. Because there has never been and shall never be anything bad about you. From the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. When some of the Pharisees asked Jesus when the kingdom of God would come, he answered, "The kingdom of God does not come by observation. Neither will they say, 'Behold, it is here,' or 'Behold, it is there,' for behold, the kingdom of God is within you." God has always been the heart of who you are. Don't for one moment longer let your ego tell you otherwise. Our ego, which we created to help us function in the world, is exactly the thing that keeps us from discovering and really intimately and unshakingly knowing the truth of who and whose we are. It is time to step into that unshakable knowing. Let ego take a long, long nap in a place far away so that you can finally awaken. Thank you.